In just 2 minutes, one congresswoman shattered the polished illusion of America's most silent first lady, and what followed was a political firestorm no one saw coming. This isn't a scandal, it's a reckoning. And behind the curtain of elegance and power lies a story of deception, control, and a rose-stamped empire built on silence. This is the moment Jasmine Crockett stopped playing by the rules and started rewriting them. Before we dive in, if you believe in stories that challenge power and expose the truth, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep this momentum alive. It was supposed to be another photo op. A glamorous evening at the American Women, American Values Gala, an event known more for its optics than its substance. The ballroom was a masterpiece of wealth and design. Vaulted ceilings, cascading chandeliers, symmetrical floral arrangements so pristine they felt digitally rendered. Cameras lined the back walls. Every angle had been considered, every smile rehearsed. At the center of it all stood Melania Trump. Draped in a pearl-colored gown that clung to her like a Grecian statue remastered for cable news, she was every inch the poised First Lady. She stepped to the podium with an elegance cultivated over years of public scrutiny. The room fell silent. No teleprompter in sight, only the illusion of authenticity. Her voice, low and deliberate, began weaving a tale of womanhood defined not by strength but by silence. In a world that asks women to yell to be heard, she said, pausing like a symphony conductor, we remind them that real strength whispers. Applause erupted, not spontaneous but coordinated, timed claps from guests, camera flashes exploding like choreographed fireworks. Senators nodded, CEOs smiled, socialites exchanged glances that screamed, "This is exactly what we paid to see." And yet, in a shadowed corner of the room, someone didn't clap. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood still. No defiance, no fanfare, just quiet resistance. Dressed in a charcoal black pantsuit, absent of jewelry or flourish, Jasmine was the anti-image of the night. She didn't need to make a scene. Her presence was enough. Hands by her sides, eyes unblinking, watching everything the cameras couldn't see. She saw the staffers backstage texting in group chats when to cue applause. She saw a senator scrolling Twitter mid-speech. She saw the press corner typing pre-written headlines into templates. And most chilling of all, she saw the mask slip, just for a heartbeat. As Melania walked past her backstage, their eyes locked. For a moment, the porcelain cracked. Behind that million-dollar smile was a flicker of something else. Fear? Recognition? Or maybe warning? Tucked inside Jasmine's blazer was a thin folder. Plain, manila, marked by a single message she couldn't forget. Not all roses are clean. Start with the ones on stage. She didn't know who sent it, but she knew exactly what it meant. And as the crowd stood to applaud Melania's final line, "Women don't shout, they shape quietly," Jasmine whispered the words to herself. Let's see how they shatter. The ballroom lights had barely cooled. The champagne flutes were still half full. The headlines already written. First Lady dazzles at Women's Gala. Melania Trump redefines quiet strength. A night of grace and elegance in Washington. Polished. Predictable. Perfectly on script. But miles away, in a plain, undecorated apartment, Jasmine Crockett kept near Capitol Hill for late-night sessions. Something real was about to erupt. The glamour of the evening dissolved into the harsh honesty of fluorescent kitchen lights and the quiet hum of a boiling kettle. She sat alone. No glam team. No speechwriters. Just her, a worn hoodie, a chipped mug of tea, and the fire that had been simmering in her chest since that fleeting moment backstage. She didn't draft a statement. She didn't schedule a press conference. She stared into her phone camera, raw, unfiltered, and pressed record. Women don't shout? Let's be clear. Silence never gave any woman her rights. Voices did. Loud ones, sharp ones, brave ones. Her tone was calm, controlled, but every word hit like a hammer. We didn't shape quietly. We marched, we bled, we got jailed, we spoke, and no silk-covered speech is going to rewrite that truth. She didn't even blink. So no, I won't whisper to be accepted. I'll speak. Because too many of us were never allowed to. She tapped post. No hashtags, no caption, just truth. She didn't expect the explosion. In 17 minutes, the video had over 20,000 views. In 40 minutes, it crossed 250,000. By morning, 2.3 million. It was everywhere. Shared by student activists, comedians, feminist influencers, even a retired Supreme Court clerk. TikTok flooded with duets. Instagram flooded with stitched reactions. One phrase echoed louder than the applause Melania had received the night before. She said what we were all thinking. But with the love came the backlash. By noon, conservative pundits were frothing. Cable news anchors scoffed with theatrical disdain. Who does she think she is? Calling out the First Lady? It's divisive. It's loud. This is why people don't take progressive women seriously. One commentator sneered into the camera, "This is a loudmouth in a pantsuit trying to pick a fight with grace." And just like that, the narrative shifted. The internet drew its battle lines: speak like Jasmine versus sit down Crockett. TikTok threads dissected her message. Facebook feeds seethed with rage posts from suburban donors. Cable segments painted her as dangerous. Podcasts called her reckless. Editorials framed her as another angry woman with a smartphone. But Jasmine? She said nothing. No rebuttals. No clarifications. No retweets. She watched, not as a politician, but as a strategist. Inside the East Wing, Melania's camp didn't panic. At first, they dismissed it as internet noise, just another viral moment destined to fade. But by nightfall, the word containment echoed through the corridors. Her digital team launched a quiet sweep, scrubbing her past quotes, fact-checking donation records, briefing surrogates. Legal aides reviewed filings. A junior staffer was yanked off speechwriting and reassigned to dig into Jasmine Crockett's political history. Still, Melania said nothing publicly. She didn't need to. Behind closed doors, she opened Jasmine's video on her private phone. Grainy lighting, no filters, no performance. Just a woman speaking plainly. She watched the full minute and a half. Then with a stare as cold as stone, she whispered to her aide, "She's not bluffing," and shut off the screen. The silence that followed wasn't surrender. It was the sound of power recalculating. Jasmine Crockett had done more than speak out. She'd lit a fuse, and Washington, polished, practiced, and built on whispers, was about to find out what happens when one voice dares to shout. Long before she ever stepped onto the floor of Congress, before the committee hearings and late-night filibusters, Jasmine Crockett was just a sister, a protector, a fighter without a title. And she would never forget the sound of that phone call. 2:17 a.m. Her mother's number lit up her screen. She nearly let it ring, knee-deep in legal briefs, half-drained Red Bulls sweating on her desk, eyes heavy from 3 days without sleep. But her gut said, "Pick up." Her mother didn't say hello. Her voice broke the second Jasmine answered. "It's Laya, baby, it's your sister." Jasmine didn't breathe. "We tried the clinic, but it was shut down. We had to drive 6 hours. She was bleeding, everywhere. They said we were lucky. 6 hours." That number carved itself into Jasmine's memory like a scar. Laya had been 17, bright, kind, too trusting. She fell for a boy who promised forever on a Friday and disappeared by Monday. She tried to be responsible. She scraped together cash. She researched online, quietly, desperately. But her state had passed a law. Parental consent, 3 appointments, and a mandatory waiting period she couldn't afford in time or money. So she did what too many girls are forced to do. She found someone. Not a doctor. Just a name passed in whispers. A woman in a motel room with rubber gloves, no license, and a prayer. By the time Laya crossed state lines, she was ghost pale, vomiting, soaked in blood. The clinic on the other side didn't ask questions. They just saved her life. If this moment moved you, if you felt what she felt, subscribe for more stories that speak the truth others won't. Her discharge papers read, "Hemorrhage due to incomplete procedure." Not a word about the why. Not a word about what the law had forced her into. Jasmine never got the full story. Laya couldn't talk about it, not for months. Years, even. That night, Jasmine sat beside her hospital bed, watching her baby sister sleep with oxygen tubes in her nose, lips white, hands trembling under the covers. The same sister who used to doodle glitter hearts on Jasmine's sneakers and tell strangers her big sis was going to change the world. Now she looked like a ghost. That was the night Jasmine stopped believing that justice lived in courtrooms. Because the law hadn't protected Laya, the law had nearly killed her. Now, years later, Jasmine sat in her DC office, the pale morning light stretching across her desk. That same ache settled in her chest as she opened the envelope again. The Women's Legacy Fund. Melania Trump's prized initiative. Elegant branding. Glossy brochures. A pastel website filled with smiling girls and slogans like "Empower with Grace." But in her hands were the receipts. The rot beneath the roses. Grants disguised as virtue, money funneled through nonprofits claiming to promote family values, parental rights, and community wellness. One name jumped out, the same group that had lobbied to shut down the last clinic in Jasmine's home state. Face Circle. One grant, $75,000 routed through shell organizations to a group pushing for a total ban on emergency contraception. Another, a motherhood grant funding disinformation ads targeting Black and Latino voters, telling them abortion was now criminal. The language was soft: preserve life, protect faith, return to values. But the results were brutal. Clinics shut, education slashed, silence weaponized. Jasmine stood, hands gripping the windowsill, staring out at the Capitol dome. People thought she came to Congress because she liked to be loud. They were wrong. She came because she knew the price of silence. She came because her sister almost didn't survive the cost. The documents weren't easy to trace. That was the point. Melania's organization had covered its tracks well, routing money through second-tier vehicles, donating just below thresholds that triggered scrutiny. But Jasmine had seen this before, funding loops disguised in phrases like identity clarity and values enrichment, names that meant nothing. Money that did everything. And this time, the fingerprints weren't from shadowy oil lobbies or backroom super PACs. This time, they led straight to the East Wing, the First Lady herself. On paper, the Women's Legacy Fund had no political agenda. Its mission? To celebrate the dignity, grace, and leadership of the modern woman. Its public face? Melania in pastel suits, hugging children, posing with women of color at luncheons that felt more like press releases than policy. It was beautiful. It was safe. It was a lie. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't going to let it stand. She pinned every red dot on her wall map like a battlefield commander. The strategy wasn't about noise, it was about exposure. Because for years, this network had grown unchecked, whispering, winding, choking its way through America's laws, clinics, and classrooms. Now, Jasmine was done whispering back. She didn't want credit. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted the truth out. Because this fight wasn't theoretical. It was personal. It was survival. It was Laia. There was a moment, brief and cutting, when Jasmine Crockett looked at the map on her office wall and felt like she wasn't tracking grants but charting a battlefield. Each red pin represented a town, a district, a law changed by a hand that never left fingerprints. Each one was quiet, legal, beautiful on paper, and all of them were bleeding. She called the file Rose Circuit because roses don't just bloom. They spread, they tangle, and left unchecked, they choke everything around them. And that was exactly what Melania Trump's Women's Legacy Fund had done. The donations weren't random, they were surgical. A $25,000 grant in Alabama to a family values group that lobbied to shut down the state's last abortion clinic. A $40,000 partnership in Ohio to a parental rights organization publishing online guides on how to defund sex education. A $15,000 donation in Florida to a wellness conference that quietly promoted conversion therapy under the euphemism identity clarity. Individually, footnotes. Together, a quiet occupation, a moral coup wrapped in floral language and framed photo ops. But Jasmine didn't bring this to the press. Not yet. She started with her own party. She booked a meeting on the 6th floor, behind closed doors with 3 senior Democrats, men and women who had once called her the future of the movement. She didn't come with a slideshow. No applause lines, no performance. Just a folder. Cold, hard, documented truth. For 40 minutes, she laid it out. The funding trails, the shell nonprofits, the ideological agenda hiding inside a philanthropic logo. She walked them through the receipts, line by line, name by name. For a moment they listened, one even whistled under his breath at the Ohio loop. Then came the silence, the shifting in chairs, the guarded glances. She'd felt it before. Not resistance, something worse, institutional discomfort. Congressman Langston leaned forward, seasoned, paternal, the kind of man who made no sound like life advice. You've clearly done your homework, Jasmine, but we need to think big picture. Congresswoman D'Angelo nodded slowly, fingers laced like a diplomat. No one's saying you're wrong, but timing matters. The election cycle's heating up. We can't afford a narrative that sounds like we're attacking the First Lady. It's delicate, Langston added. She's not a senator. She's a symbol. Jasmine felt her jaw tighten, but her voice stayed calm. A symbol that's quietly funding the erosion of women's rights. If we wait for the right time, we'll be too late. Again. D'Angelo offered a soft, practiced smile, the kind used to soften knives. We're saying, be smart, choose your battles. This is the battle. Jasmine replied evenly. I watched my sister almost die because a law funded by people like this got passed. We talk about reproductive rights like they're up for debate. They're not. They're survival. Langston sighed. Personal stakes make you passionate, Jasmine. That's admirable, but it can also cloud judgment. There it was. Not a refusal, not even criticism, just a soft, smiling dismissal. A push back into her place. They told her to forward the documents to the Oversight Committee. Let the process work. Let staffers review it in private. In other words, let it die quietly. She left with her folder untouched. By the time she reached the elevator, a message waited on her phone. Your subcommittee assignment has been shifted. Schedule balance. Your joint press-op was rescheduled. Messaging cohesion. Not retaliation. Containment. The machine doing what it always does. Sanding down the edges, smoothing the cracks, pretending nothing was wrong. Jasmine stared at her reflection in the elevator door. Her hands were steady, her jaw locked. This is what it looked like when truth became inconvenient. When the people who said they had your back decided you were too much, too loud, too real to protect. And that was when she made her decision. She hadn't come to Congress to be reasonable. She came to set fires. And this time, she wasn't asking anyone's permission. It began with a clip, just 42 seconds. Taken from a heated committee hearing months earlier. Context stripped away, her full argument chopped into silence, just a flash of frustration, a raised voice, a pointed finger, enough for the machine to do its work. Unhinged, the headline screamed. Radical. This isn't leadership, it's hysteria in heels. Right-wing anchors played the clip on loop. Satirical parodies mocked her tone, her hair, her suit. Hashtags bloomed like rot. Calm down Crockett, angry not able, Melania had grace. By day 2, deepfakes hit social media. Fake videos of Jasmine storming out of Congress, screaming at voters, tearing up Melania's speech, none of it real. But in a world fueled by scrolls and algorithms, reality was optional. And her party? Silent. One colleague texted, tough break. Might want to lay low a few days. Another canceled a town hall. A third ghosted entirely. The message was clear. She'd become inconvenient. She scrolled the comments under her last post. Too emotional. Another angry black woman. You had potential, now you're just noise. That word again. Noise. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just sat still and listened. To the silence. To the way the world turned up her volume only to drown out her message. To the way they reframed her, not as truth-teller, but as spectacle. And somewhere in a quiet office, Melania's team watched the views climb. They hadn't refuted the facts. They just reframed the messenger. And for now, it was working. But Jasmine wasn't done. Because behind all the noise, she was still holding the file. And she wasn't going to let this story end with a hashtag. They called it a meltdown. That's what the headline said, spliced together from a 42-second video clip pulled from a 3-hour committee hearing where Jasmine Crockett had been the only voice pushing back on a bill that would strip funding from women's health services. But none of that made it into the final cut. They took her raised voice, her pointed finger, the way her jaw clenched when a colleague accused her of making it personal, and they looped it, over and over and over, unhinged, angry, too emotional, not fit to lead. Fox News anchors leaned into it gleefully. This is the face of the radical left. This is what happens when emotion replaces policy. Is this the woman we want shaping our future? They didn't care what she had actually said. They didn't need to. Because the clip did the work. It fed the narrative they wanted. Jasmine Crockett not as a congresswoman or whistleblower, but as a threat. A woman too loud, too passionate, too black to be taken seriously. Within 48 hours the internet turned her into a caricature. Hashtags bloomed, calm down Crockett, angry not able, Melania had grace. And then came the AI videos, deep fakes that blurred the line between satire and smear. Jasmine screaming at children in fake town halls. Jasmine tearing up a mock Melania speech. Jasmine storming out of meetings she never attended. None of it was real. But that didn't matter. Reality wasn't required. Volume was. Her inbox flooded with threats. Her office phone rang with voicemails too vile to repeat. Her staff fielded calls from constituents who had seen a doctored clip and now believed Jasmine was mentally unstable. And from her own party? Silence. One senator, who had once introduced her at a gala as the new voice of courage, texted her, "Tough break, might want to lay low a bit." Another postponed their joint town hall indefinitely. Another refused to be seen walking into the same room with her. The shift was fast and surgical. She was no longer the rising star. She was a liability. But the sting didn't come from her enemies. It came from her allies, the ones who claimed to stand for justice, until justice got inconvenient. She scrolled through the comments beneath her last post. "You had potential. Now you're just noise." Typical. Loud and angry and going nowhere. Noise. The word followed her like smoke, like static, like a collar they wanted to tighten. She didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She just listened. To the silence, to the way people turned up her volume just to mute her message. And somewhere in a quiet East Wing office, Jasmine imagined Melania Trump watching the chaos unfold, smiling, not because she had refuted anything, but because the machine didn't need to argue with Jasmine. It only needed to reframe her. But Jasmine wasn't done, because while the internet fixated on the noise, she was still holding the file. And 3 days ago, she received a message, encrypted. No sender, no name, just a single, chilling offer. "I have proof." The sender claimed to be a former financial analyst with direct access to the Women's Legacy Fund, someone on the inside. The messages came in short, sharp bursts. Specific donation numbers Jasmine hadn't yet uncovered. Nicknames only internal staff would know. A warning: some of the biggest grants were rerouted through education nonprofits. Check Florida. And finally, "We need to meet. Off record. No press. I'll bring documents." They arranged a location, quiet diner in Arlington, Tuesday night, back booth. Jasmine didn't tell her team. She drove herself. No makeup, no congressional badge, hoodie, jeans, eyes sharp. She ordered tea and didn't drink it. She watched every face that entered the diner. 7:58 p.m., 8 to 10, 8:25, nothing. Then, 8:39 p.m., her phone buzzed. "Sorry, something came up, can't meet, will explain soon." No name, no profile, no voice. She waited another hour. 10:03 p.m., she walked to her car under the yellow halo of streetlight and rain. By the time she got home, she checked the message again. The account was gone. No message history, no username, nothing. She didn't sleep. At sunrise, sitting at her desk, her phone buzzed again. Different number, no contact name, one sentence. "Careful, Congresswoman, she burns quietly." Jasmine stared at the screen. Not fear. Clarity. This wasn't just a warning. This was pressure. Someone close to the machine had spoken out and disappeared. Not discredited, not exposed, removed, quietly, efficiently. Jasmine didn't forward the message, didn't alert Capitol Police, didn't call the press. She just stared at it, memorized it, let the words etch themselves into her resolve. She burns quietly. Melania. The fund. The system that wrapped itself in elegance and crushed people underneath it. The truth was, Jasmine didn't know who she was anymore. It could have been any of them. Or all of them. But one thing was clear now. This wasn't just political. This was personal. And if they thought this would scare her off, they didn't understand the woman they were dealing with. Because Jasmine Crockett had already watched a system almost destroy her family. And she wasn't going to let it happen again. Not quietly. Not ever. She sat in the dark for a long time. The message, "Careful, Congresswoman, she burns quietly," was still on her phone screen. Its glow cast a sharp outline across her face in the pre-dawn shadows of her office. Most people would take it as a threat. Jasmine read it as a confession, because only the guilty warn you not to speak. She didn't sleep. She didn't flinch. She didn't tell anyone. Not her chief of staff, not her communications team. She didn't want advice. She didn't want caution. She wanted truth, and she finally understood what it would cost to reveal it. The silence wasn't safety, it was strategy, and she was done playing by those rules. By 7 a.m., her war room was set. Not in some polished Capitol conference room, but in her office, lit by sunlight cutting through half-drawn blinds. On her wall were taped ledgers, maps, speech transcripts, foundation registrations. She drew lines with red string like an investigator in a crime drama, because that's what this was, a political crime scene. The Women's Legacy Fund wasn't just a nonprofit. It was a smokescreen. A benevolent face painted over the machinery of systemic control. Each dollar that looked like a gift was actually a weapon. Targeted funding for ideological warfare dressed in the language of empowerment. And she had everything now. The network of shell nonprofits. The money trails that bypassed federal oversight. The school districts, hospitals, and advocacy groups that had been quietly influenced or corrupted. And the final piece, a leaked internal memo showing WLF grants were used to reward policy compliance on school boards in swing states. The signature at the bottom? Not Melania's. She was too careful for that. But the recipient's name was clear. Senator Daniel Carver, author of a bill to eliminate comprehensive sex education in 14 states. That afternoon, Jasmine made one call, not to the press, not to the party. She called Zariah Quinn, a Pulitzer-winning journalist with a reputation for truth over access and a long memory for stories Washington tried to bury. Zariah didn't say much at first, she just listened. Then she said, "I've been waiting for someone with the guts to go on record." That night, Jasmine filmed a new video, not shaky phone footage. This was deliberate, lit cleanly, centered, calm, but unflinching. She looked straight into the lens, hands on the table, no script, no edits, just the raw power of someone who had tried quiet and seen it fail. They told me to sit down. They told me to wait. They told me to be careful. But here's what I've learned. Silence doesn't protect you. It just protects them. The Women's Legacy Fund is not about legacy. It's about control. And I have proof. Financial, structural, political. The First Lady of the United States is at the center of a funding network that influences policy decisions in direct contradiction to the values it pretends to uplift. And I won't be silent anymore. She posted it, with one word, not all roses. Within minutes, it went nuclear. Not viral. Detonated. Cable news anchors gasped live on air. Zariah's exposé dropped simultaneously with Jasmine's post, featuring whistleblower testimony, scanned ledgers, internal emails, and names. Not all roses trended in 73 countries within hours. By midnight, the New York Times, The Guardian, and Al Jazeera were all running lead headlines on one phrase: First Lady's Empowerment Fund linked to anti-rights campaign. The White House issued a review statement. Melania's communications director called it a political hit job rooted in misinformation. But for the first time, they weren't controlling the narrative. Jasmine was. The next morning, she received another message. No name, no trace, just a single sentence. You don't know what you've started. She smiled. Because she did. She started a fire. And this time, it wasn't going out. A congressional inquiry is launched. Journalists dig deeper. Melania cancels a major public appearance. Jasmine, she walks into the Capitol steps, head held high, surrounded by girls holding hand-painted signs. Loud is a strength. Not all roses are clean. Jasmine speaks for us. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. They wanted her quiet, they wanted her polite, they wanted her manageable. But Jasmine Crockett gave them something else. Truth, not wrapped in pleasantries, not whispered behind closed doors, but delivered loud, clear, and unafraid. And in a world where silence is often mistaken for strength, she reminded us, strength is not silence, grace is not complicity, and justice does not wait for permission. The story of Jasmine Crockett isn't just a political drama, it's a warning, a rally cry, and a mirror. Because the next time a woman dares to speak when it's inconvenient, when she won't wait her turn, when she pulls the curtain back on power dressed as elegance, ask yourself, what side of history will you be on? This was never about one woman versus another. It was about truth versus the illusion of control. And Jasmine, she didn't just survive the fire, she became it. If this story opened your eyes, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to boost this message. Subscribe for more truth others are too afraid to tell. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what they don't want you to see.